Judo is one of the few Bluey characters who's actually disliked by part of the fandom, mainly because she's kinda bossy sometimes and even made Bingo cry once. But did you know there are reasons behind her personality? Apparently, Judo is going through some personal issues. Divorced parents. You may have noticed that in every episode where Judo shows up with her mom, Wendy, they're never seen with any other family members. Even at home, it's always just the two of them. That's because, as it seems, Wendy is a single mother. In other words, Judo's dad, for some reason, is not really present in her life. The most likely explanation is that Wendy separated from him, which means Judo went through her parents' divorce, something that's pretty traumatic for a child. One clue that Judo's parents are in this situation is that the little pup isn't always around the neighborhood, even though her mom lives right next door to the Healer family. That makes total sense when you remember that many divorced couples share custody of their kids. And what if those times she's away are actually spent at her dad's place? He could live in another part of town, or maybe even in a different city. Let's just hope Wendy ended things with her ex-husband peacefully and that they don't hate each other or anything like that, because that would only make things worse. As you can see, Bluey's neighbor is much more complex than we might think at first glance. But relax, because we're about to tell you everything about the hidden truth you don't know about Judo. So get comfy, because another Cinewave is starting right now! Half-brother. The main reason why a good part of the fandom dislikes this little Chow Chow pup is that her very first appearance was in the episode Butterflies, where she was rude to Bingo for no reason and showed that she doesn't really like younger kids like her. This led some fans to come up with the theory that this dislike is tied to her parents' divorce. After all, if Judo's dad is no longer married to her mom, he would have married another woman and started a new family with a new child. That would mean Judo has a half-brother. Knowing the Chow Chow's personality, she might see this half-brother as a rival who stole her dad away, especially since they live together while Judo only gets limited time with him. If that's the case, jealousy might have turned into resentment. Resentment she then directed toward all younger kids, just like her half-brother. The breaking point of that episode was when Judo convinced Bluey to ditch Bingo so the two of them could play completely alone without thinking about how much that would hurt the youngest Healer. What people forget, though, is that she regretted it at the end and apologized, becoming a real friend to Bingo from that point on. Judo managed to overcome her trauma, at least partially, by realizing she had been unfair. This is even highlighted in her description on the official Bluey website, where she's called bossy and impatient. It also says that she doesn't mean to be that way and does her best to change her behavior. Orphan. Another darker possibility behind the fact that Judo's dad has never appeared is that maybe he didn't just divorce, but actually passed away because of an illness or a tragic accident. The divorce theory does make a lot of sense and is highly likely, but we can't ignore the possibility that his fate might have been even sadder than we imagined. Because if Judo's dad is still alive, the show has wasted plenty of chances to show him, even if it were just him pulling up in a car to pick her up or take her to his place. Judo probably should have at least mentioned her dad and talked about him with Bluey. But when someone loses a family member, it's normal to avoid the subject, since it can still hurt to talk about it, especially if it happened recently. Wendy also doesn't seem the least bit interested in finding a new partner. Could it be because she's just not ready for another relationship after the divorce? Sure, that's possible, but it's even harder to start something new when you're a widow. It's not impossible or wrong, of course, but before anything else, you need to heal from the tragedy, and for some people that can take a long time. That could very well be Wendy's case. Thinking about it that way, it would actually be pretty interesting if the show confirmed that Judo's mom is a widow, showing her moving on from the tragedy and eventually starting a new relationship. If you also think Bluey's neighbor's backstory deserves more attention, drop a comment below with #Judo. Overprotective mom. Speaking of Wendy, the way she raised Judo also had a big influence on her daughter's difficult personality. At least, that's what it seems like based on the episode Dirt. In it, Judo tries to play in the dirt with Bluey and Bingo, but she struggles to do it because she doesn't want to get dirty. However, the one who really didn't want her to get dirty was actually her mom, mainly because they're both Chow Chows, a breed with very beautiful fur, but extremely hard to take care of. In that same episode, we see Wendy spending a lot of time grooming her daughter's fur, even though the girl herself doesn't really care that much. This shows how Judo's mom is kind of overprotective, treating her daughter almost like a doll. That kind of controlling attitude affects any child's mind, and it makes sense to think that Judo became bossy with her friends precisely because her mom is bossy with her, teaching her that this is the right way to show affection. She even gives up playing at the end of the episode because she knows she'd end up dirty. Luckily, Wendy realized she was being too harsh with her daughter and cut Judo's fur so she could have fun without worrying about all that fuss. Wendy even cut her own hair to set an example. She may not be a perfect mom, but she learns from her mistakes, something that unfortunately is rare among many parents. But it's great that Bluey sets an example not only for kids, but for their parents too. Expectations. And if we stop to think about it, that overprotection Wendy had with Judo, at least until the end of that episode, wasn't the kind parents usually show just to keep their child safe, but rather to maintain the family's honor. Judo's mom is very proud of being a Chow Chow, and because of that, she seems to place way too many expectations on her daughter to keep up her good looks. Good thing she eventually stopped doing that, right? Well, at least when it comes to appearances, yes. But the expectations Judo faces might actually be in other areas. In the episode Baby Race, Judo is the puppy who learned to walk first among all the kids present at the neighborhood mom's meeting. Wendy seems really proud of her little girl. That's normal and fine, but considering her history of being kind of controlling with her daughter, it makes sense to see a red flag here. With good intentions, Judo's mom probably did everything she could to make her develop as many skills as possible, but at the same time, her daughter might feel smothered by all those high expectations. It's no coincidence that unlike most of the kids on the show, Judo doesn't go to the same school as Bluey. She probably goes to a private school or maybe is homeschooled, all so she can get the best possible education even at such a young age. Few friends. Going back to the episode Butterflies, a line between Bluey and Bingo shows us something else about our beloved and controversial Judo. Bingo complains about the neighbor being bossy, and Bluey agrees, but also points out that Judo doesn't have anyone else to play with. Yes, the little one doesn't have many friends other than Bluey and Bingo. The character description on the show's official website also confirms this, saying that she's only friends with the two sisters and Pom Pom. In fact, that same description explains the main reason why she has so few friends. Chow Chow dogs are very attached to specific people and usually have a very small social circle. But that's the thing, they may only have a few friendships, but those friendships are deep and real. Bluey herself has been friends with Judo since they were both babies. Bingo was born later, which might explain why it took her longer to warm up to Judo. So this Chow Chow trait makes it hard for her to make new friends, and that's definitely a problem. Just imagine if the Healer family had actually moved away in the episode The Sign. Judo would have been really lonely, and it would have taken her a long time to make new friends, if she made any at all. Yes, there would have been a real risk that she might never make more friends, or at least spend the rest of her childhood in isolation until she formed new bonds. When you think about it that way, it's actually pretty sad. But if there's one thing that will never make you sad, it's clicking that subscribe button. That way you'll start getting all of our content about your favorite cartoons, so don't miss out. Immigrant. We all know that parents' lives and past experiences also affect their kids. So the story of Bluey's friend who lives next door gains extra depth when we remember that her mom is an immigrant. That's right, Wendy used to live in England before becoming a resident of Australia. In fact, you can even notice that Wendy still has the accent from her home country, but that's not the case with Judo, which shows she has always lived in Australia. That makes sense, since she and her mom have been in the country since Baby Race, which takes place back when Judo and Bluey were just babies. But like it or not, Judo has spent her whole life alongside her English mother, and the way she was raised could definitely reflect that. The English are known for their culture of hierarchy and respect, with England still having a king to this day. Of course, that doesn't mean everyone in the country follows 30 different etiquette rules just to eat. Peppa Pig is from there, and she doesn't follow them. But doesn't that fit perfectly with everything we've been saying in this video about how Wendy raises her daughter, demanding perfection from her and overprotecting her like a doll? Or better yet, like a princess? Difficult personality. Considering all of this, it's easier to understand how Judo ended up becoming such a complicated little pup. People are complex, and their past always affects their future. Thankfully, she's been learning to be less jealous and even became friends with Bingo, while her mom has been learning to be less strict and allow her daughter to have more fun. This could have turned into a really sad story, but we believe Bluey will keep showing both of the Healer neighbors evolving and becoming incredible individuals. And if, along the way, the show decides to reveal a bit more about Judo's past, and especially about her dad, that's nothing but a win, right? Want to keep watching us? Don't worry, we've left 2 awesome videos right here on your screen. Thanks, and see you next time!